Hey, what's up? This is episode number 8 of Speaking Wrestling with Elvis Arroyo. I am Elvis Arroyo. Hope everybody's been having a great week this week. I thank you very much for checking out last week's episodes and all previous episodes. They're available everywhere you get your podcasts. And if you haven't heard, we are available on YouTube at Speaking Wrestling over on YouTube, guys. Also, you can find us on social media platforms over at Instagram at Speaking Wrestling and on Twitter at Speaking Wrestle. Alright guys, let's get into this episode. I'm going to first start off speaking about Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn. Last week's episode, at the tail end of it, on the most valuable performers of the week and floppers of the week, Kevin Owens made it to the floppers of the week last week list. And of course that list is reserved for those that flop during the week on television. And this week, it was nice to see Kevin Owens on Monday Night Raw and in the opening segment on Monday Night Raw, and then later in the main event of Monday Night Raw against Seth Rollins. But it's interesting of where he's being positioned this week because unlike flopping last week, which him and Sami had a tag team match that was forgettable, you almost forget that it even happened. But this week, Kevin Owens, along with Sami Zayn, are in a good spot on Monday Night Raw. Use and utilize, and heck, like I said, Kevin Owens in the main event against the Universal Champion. And the thing that I said that's interesting about how he's being used this week is because he's being used as another one of Baron Corbin's henchmen with Sami Zayn. It's WWE. It seems like they're rotating these henchmen between Shane and Baron Corbin. They must get together and decide, who do you got this week? Shane, I got the Revival this week. Fine. Then I got Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn. And then next week, I got Elias and Drew McIntyre. And Baron Corbin says, well, I got Bobby Lashley and so-and-so. It's a revolving group of guys that are just, Shane McMahon's and Baron Corbin's henchmen. And in this case, Baron Corbin's got some new henchmen, Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn. Not the way that I would utilize Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn. And look, guys, I've been saying it for a few weeks now. I even said it last week on the podcast. If you're not going to keep these two separated, Sami and Kevin, that is, make them a tag team. Officially make them a tag team and have them go after those tag team titles. Raw and Smackdown tag team divisions are in dire need of some talent that's going to help lift that division up. Two guys who could utilize their talents. They're both are amazing on the microphone, and both in-ring skills are impeccable. These two are main event guys, and they're being utilized to do Baron Corbin's dirty work, to do Shane McMahon's dirty work. Again, I think missed opportunity here for Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn, who I like. I really like Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn. But again, it's how they're being utilized on the program. And they want to put them as Baron Corbin's henchmen. And then on SmackDown, as we saw, were Dolph Ziggler's henchmen. It seems like, if you're one of the top heels, you've got some friends. And bad guys don't have a lot of friends. Well, in this case, all the heels have friends that back up. Interesting, when you see a babyface getting attacked, nobody comes out and saves the babyface, but if you're a heel, you can sure count on your buddies. Moving on from that fiasco into another fiasco. We're talking about people not being utilized, and it's one thing that John Moxley said in his interview with Wade Keller about talent not being utilized. They're just there. They're there and they're not being used. It's nice to see that in the United States title picture, there's opportunity there, as we saw this week. But once again, leave it up to WWE and their writers, or Vince in this case, to have this segment where everybody comes out, has a microphone, and they all say their line, and it leads into a tag team match. But you clearly see right through it. And I spoke about this maybe about on the third episode when they did this about a month ago. You can totally tell that they're coming out and saying their one or two lines. The next person comes out, say one or two lines, cue up the next person, and it just looks so much like they're putting on a show. And again, I talked about this earlier where, yes, Monday Night Raw and SmackDown are shows, but you're not supposed to show the audience so much that this is, predetermined, or that in this case that everything is pre-written for you. but it shows. It clearly comes through the screen, and it comes through if you're in the live audience, that they are just reminiscing their lines and going over them and hitting their spots. And this is one of those segments that I want WWE to get rid of. Why do they keep doing it? Again, it's filler. It's, get a guy on a microphone or a woman and kill some time. And it seemed like this show this week, Monday Night Raw, was a lot of talking, so much talking in that first hour. But again, back to the title being utilized. They had a Miz TV segment with Samoa Joe and The Miz, and that got a little personal. Good stuff. Anything with The Miz, and put the microphone on The Miz, and I'll be entertained. Send out 6 guys in a rows with microphones, I'm out. But in this case, the U.S. title picture looks like it finally has a scene. A scene. Yes, a scene. 6-man tag team match. Heels on one side, faces on one side. Braun, Ricochet, Miz, Samoa Joe, Lashley, and Cesaro. Good match. Finish. Cesaro caught that 630 from Ricochet right on his knee. Looked like he got it right on his quad. He looked like a serious injury, but the reports are coming back. Cesaro's okay. He's walking. Good for him. Not a time right now, Cesaro getting a solo push. And this looks like it's a legit solo push for him. Good for him. He's got something to chase after, and it's that U.S. title. Ricochet is somebody who he's got something to work for now. And, get another win up against Cesaro, make it for the U.S. title, have it in the picture, great. Braun is another guy who he's a main event quality guy, but they just don't seem to trust him and put him in that position. A U.S. title run going up against Joe would be great. Or heck, put the title on Cesaro or Braun. I would love to see Cesaro versus Braun Strowman. Give us that, strength versus strength type of match. I think that's a good one right there. And again, Miz, always so good to see him. As it was good to see the Raw Tag Team Champions this week on TV. It's been a long time. It's something that on this podcast gets mentioned every single week. Where are the Raw Tag Team Champions? And last week on this show, I even threw in a little not safe for work language on the show. That might have worked, and if it did, I might start doing more often on the show. But the bottom line is the Raw Tag Team Champions were back on Monday night. They were back on Raw. Funny, Raw Tag Team Champions, and never on Raw up until this week. And another funny thing is that if you happen to forgot that there is a Raw Tag Team Champions, and if you happen to forgot how the Raw Tag Team Champions became champions in the first place, it's just so sad that the WWE has to show a video clip of 2 months ago at WrestleMania where Zack Ryder and Kurt Hawkins defeated the Revival to capture the Raw Tag Team Championships, and only for them to appear after being gone for weeks on television in a triple threat match with the Usos and Revival, who have been getting all the TV time and all the tag team segments, both on Raw and SmackDown and pay-per-views, show up to Monday night only to drop the titles. And it makes sense. Yes, it is disheartening to see that the Raw Tag Team Champions won that amazing match at WrestleMania, the Cinderella story, only to just have it dropped off on a whimsy Monday night to the Revival. Now, I know you were thinking, yes, bad WWE, shame on you once again, taking away something that's good, something that could have been great away from us if you had just built to it and made it great. Well, at least it's on the right tag teams, Usos and the Revival, who are the real stars of the show. Again, look, I don't want to discredit Zack Ryder and Kurt Hawkins. They are a great tag team, and I was really happy for them, and I really thought that this was a start of something that could have, molded into bringing in their action figures and being the ultimate baby faces for the kids and for the audience to really get behind and go up against Revival and AOP, tag teams like that. It's good that it's on the tag teams that are putting on great quality matches like the Usos and Revival. And look, it should have always been on the Usos or the Revival, that the way that their storylines were dragged out, post WrestleMania and for the last several months. You clearly watch their matches and sometimes think to yourself, shouldn't the tag team titles be involved in this somehow? Yes, their matches will be worth something, and it won't be about Uzi Hot or a block party or that matter. It's actually going to be worth something. And here we have the Raw Tag Team Championships back on television. So good for them. And speaking of tag team titles, and it's nice to see Daniel Bryan and Rowan back on television, the SmackDown Tag Team Champions. And it's nice to see Heavy Machinery on SmackDown, finally, on television. And it looks like we got this built-in program with it between Heavy Machinery and Daniel Bryan and Rowan. Good stuff. It's good to see tag team wrestling back on television, isn't it? It's not like what we're used to seeing. I'll leave it at that. Moving on, and now to something that got a lot of TV time this week, and that is the Women's Championships. Preferably Bayley this week. She was on Raw and SmackDown. She was teaming up with the Raw Women's Champion, Becky Lynch, over on Monday night, taking on Nikki and Alexa Bliss. It was a good tag team match. And over on SmackDown, we saw Bayley take on Nikki one-on-one, and an impressive win by Bayley. She was in her hometown this week on Monday Night Raw. Again, Bayley's been impressive since capturing the title. I really like, they're really pushing her and they're building her up. They're not letting her fall like the previous time that she captured a championship over on Monday Night Raw. Good win for this. The only thing, that sometimes, and I said it last week, is the consistency in storytelling. And again, last week I mentioned where Alexa Monday night was more of a face with Nikki, and on Tuesday she was back to being Alexa on Moment of Bliss with Bayley. And this week, there is some story being told with Alexa and Nikki there. We'll wait to see, how it unfolds. It surely can tell that it's leading to Alexa maybe capturing that SmackDown Women's Championship over Bayley with a little help of Nikki. We'll see. But definitely interesting there, the storyline. But again, the storyline is crossing on Monday nights and then back onto Tuesday nights. It's maybe, is it a little bit too much? I would think that if you are a champion in one brand, you should just stay on that brand, because you have a place to be. You have challengers. You have competitors aiming for you, and they can't go on Raw if they're SmackDown only competitors, unless they are part of the wild card, whatever that is, quote Kevin Owens. And I would say you leave up the wild card for, guys like, Lars, like an Ember Moon from time to time. You don't want to do that to your champions, because that's when stories get mixed up. That's when someone gets left behind on one show because they can't cross over to the next. Pretty much in that case. And in another storyline that sometimes has been getting a little bit mixed up is this Lacey and Becky storyline. Along like last week when you had Lacey going one-on-one with Charlotte on Raw, and that debacle of a match that it was. Not a good sighting for Lacey Evans, who is getting this push right now with the champ. Sky's the limits for her there. She's got a bright future for her, but a match like that, like she had last week on Raw, isn't going to do a girl any favors. This week in that tag team match that I mentioned, and this week was major improvements for Lacey. She looked very impressive in that tag team match this past Monday Night Raw. I say have quality matches like that. I don't think putting her against Charlotte, look, that's a pay-per-view match. That's a rivalry you can have down the road. That's a pairing down the road. Let's kind of separate the SmackDown superstars and the Raw. Lacey is caught up in a storyline with the Raw Women's Championship. Let's leave everybody else out of that. No SmackDown competitors getting involved in the middle of one brand's story. That's only one little thing there that taken away from this week's women's segments. Just a little nitpicking if I could. Moving on to 24/7 title. This is something that has a lot of people talking about, and it's been talked about since its debut. Now, it wasn't received really well when we were presented the 24/7 title, but week after week after week, it's one of the most talked about segments. And I did mention on this podcast the week that the 24/7 title was introduced, I did say that maybe come SummerSlam time, the 24/7 title will be the most over championship in WWE. It's looking like I'm headed there. We're yet to see, but this week back to the shenanigans with the 24/7 title. Truth is great, man. He's amazing. This week on Raw, they had the segment where he was, being chased by all the superstars in the locker room into an elevator. Only thing, and they get locked in an elevator. There's no referee in the elevator. Next thing you know, elevator crashes. Now, the thought process of this is intelligent. It's great. I love it. It's fun. It's all over the place. Thing that took me out of that segment is WWE having access to an elevator security camera. Wouldn't you know, the one time that you pack an elevator full of WWE superstars, it's gonna break down. It's once again, look, it's clever, it's funny, it's something that would be hilarious in a TV show or in a very funny movie, but a live program like Monday Night Raw and SmackDown Live are portrayed to have all of these things happen, and for the access to be there at their fingertips, is what takes me out. It's the same thing when we spoke last week about, the video promos that, Kofi and Dolph were having back and forth, literally just coming up with these thoughts from the past in their mind, and then voila, a video comes up of it. And it, again, in this case, it's similar to some of those Strowman segments that we've seen in the past, where there's just a camera right there. And again, there was a camera under the ring last week when Truth won the title back from Elias. They had a camera right underneath the ring. And when you watch something like that live, it's funny, it's great. But then once WWE shows you that it was all a work, and it's clearly a work, and this, would never happen in these circumstances unless everything was planned out. And in this case, everything is planned out. So the element of that this is happening live is gone. It's gone in the instant that you know that this is a work. And yes, professional wrestling is a work, but you're not supposed to show that. You're not supposed to let the audience know that what they are watching isn't real, although they are taking it as it is real. Again, look, I don't want to nitpick too much on it. 24/7 title. I like what they did over on SmackDown. Truth in the case. Jinder coming back and the case is gone. Carmella looking for Truth, and you got one of the crew guys saying that the cases are already been packed up and they're going to Los Angeles next week, which they will be there for Raw at Staples Center next Monday. So it only lets you to think that Truth is going to be in a box for 6 days until that box arrives at Staples Center next Monday. What can happen? What can happen to Truth? Who knows? Although, and I'll just leave it at that, Michael Cole did mention on Raw that R-Truth has been invited to the Firefly Funhouse. I'll leave it at that. And speaking of Firefly Funhouse, another one of those segments that's talked about and praised every week for being the best thing on Raw and SmackDown, if you're watching the programs, is the Firefly Funhouse. And again, another segment, it's good stuff. We got to see Ramblin' Rabbit. We got to see Mercy the Buzzard here. We're seeing those little signs, those little indications that the evil Bray Wyatt, or this chaotic monster that lives inside Bray Wyatt, comes out from time to time and shows. And in this week, he let it all show when he killed Ramblin' Rabbit, made breakfast jam out of it. I like that he said that, make sure you start every morning with a smash. Little innuendo there, I'd say. Good stuff. These little bits are great. Some people say that this is the best stuff WWE is doing right now besides the wrestling, which is really, really an indication of where WWE is at right now. That their entertainment part of WWE programming is the focal point, not so much the wrestling. And again, that's something that, isn't something new. And lastly, one interesting thing from this week's television, no Roman Reigns. For as much as last week I did talk about Is there too much Roman Reigns the last few weeks? We're getting him involved with that Shane storyline. He's in 6-man tag team matches on Raw, and he's in tag matches here on SmackDown. He's all over the place. Is it too much Roman? And in this case, no Roman. And I will say that the shows were a little bit flat. I wasn't so big or hyped on these two shows. They weren't the best, but they weren't the worst. But an absent Roman Reigns, and there were a lot of guys absent this week that they could have used. But it's nice to see other talent being used in this matter. A lot of faces that we don't get to see on TV appear this week. So is Roman Reigns not being on TV a good thing for WWE? I guess only the ratings, will show. But off a show like Super Showdown, Roman Reigns not being on TV this week, I think I'm okay with that. I did mention Super Showdown, which is one of the things that coming out of this past weekend, everybody was talking about. And of course, everybody was talking about Goldberg and The Undertaker. And boy, for a match that all social media literally took a big dump on going into it and after it, it's still one of the most talked about matches of this past weekend. If not, it might be of this year, because boy, was that a match to go back and watch. Not that it was great, but it's one of those that you got to watch. Look, we know what happened. The reports are that Goldberg concussed himself, likely before the match, as he always gets, really into it and bangs his head against the door. But I would say it's the moment where he ran into the post, about maybe 3/4 towards the end of the match, ran into the post, busted himself open, and he wasn't the same from that moment on. And Taker, man, Taker's doing the best he can to still put on one of the best matches. But when your opponent is gassed and he's winded and he's concussed and he's bleeding, and you got 110-degree weather in Saudi Arabia, what can go wrong? A lot can go wrong. But you got a professional like The Undertaker, who is one of the most professional, if not the most professional guy in the business, which is why he is The Undertaker. Not the best and prettiest looking win, but it was a win for The Undertaker. And look, the frustration on his face kind of said it all. I mean, and I think the frustration on his face pretty much said it for the entire show. If you watched that show or haven't, I would recommend to watch. I would definitely say match of the night was Triple H and Randy Orton. Yeah, and going back to that Super Showdown main event with Undertaker and Goldberg, again, not the prettiest match, but definitely one to check back out. And I hope this isn't the last for The Undertaker. It doesn't look like it, because the Saudis seem to have him bought up. So I think another Undertaker match later on down the road at Saudi Arabia is in the works. Undertaker doing the best he can. He looked great. Goldberg looked great as well. I just think that the conditions, maybe Goldberg wasn't in the best ring shape. He looks great. Ring shape is a whole lot different from looking great and, being at the top level of an athlete. So that was Super Showdown, a real quick take on that. But before we go, as always, we finish up this show with MVPs and floppers of the week. My MVP Performer of the week this week, I'm going to give it to The Miz. Miz was in action this week on Raw and SmackDown, and he hosted 2 Miz segments. I think that's deserving of a Performer of the Week. And for my Flopper of the Week this week is Kevin Owens with Sami Zayn. And I got to emphasize on the with Sami Zayn, it's not Kevin Owens made it and Sami also made it as well. It's Kevin Owens with Sami. Just mainly Kevin Owens dragging Sami into this with the shenanigans that they had on Monday Night Raw in the main event, and being Corbin's henchman, then being Dolph's henchman. I've said it before, it's kind of like a slippery slope for the Kevin Owens character, and this week he's bringing along Sami Zayn with him, who Sami's has been very interesting and intriguing character since post WrestleMania, and he's been back and he's cutting those promos, and he's had great matches since he's been back. Being in this situation with Kevin Owens is kind of dragging him. That's why I gotta say Kevin Owens' character is definitely a flopper of the week this week, and he's dragging Sami along with him. All right, guys, that's going to do it for this week. I thank you so much for checking out this podcast. Thank you so much for downloading all the previous episodes, and you can find them anywhere you get your podcasts. Be sure to check us over on our YouTube at Speaking Wrestling. And once again, leave comments and questions for the podcast over at Speaking Wrestling on Instagram and Speaking Wrestle on Twitter. All right, guys, that's going to do it for this week. I hope you guys have a great weekend. And on to next Friday. Bye.